All right. So we have a webinar this evening. Please, sit back, relax. You can type questions into the Q&A box. And also this meeting is being recorded, so you're welcome to share it with your friends and, share it broadly in our community after tonight. It'll be available on the League of Women Voters YouTube channel. All right, so the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan education and advocacy organization. At the core of who we are as an organization is about empowering voters and defending democracy. So what do I love about the League? The League is a place that works on issues that impact our communities. Our communities, our families, our neighbors, from voting rights to climate change and community planning and programs like tonight. So if you're out there, especially those of you in the Zoom world, thinking, how do I get involved in the League? How do I get involved in my community? Come and talk to us. There is a place for you within the League of Women Voters of Corvallis. Tonight's program is hosted by the Voter Education Committee. I wanted to do two announcements for the League. One is that we have a fruit sale going on right now, and Louise is here. She is our fruit sale guru. And what are the main points of the fruit sale dates and deadlines, Louise?
Let's see. Fruit sale raises money for all of our local League activities. I buy 50 extra boxes of fruit, so you can keep buying until it's gone. But officially, it ends on November 15th because that's when I turn in the numbers. And it does close down for PayPal. You can order through PayPal or send a check, or I think our order form is online.
Great. Thank you so much, Louise. And then we also have, for League members, an annual renewal of membership. And that goes through October. Great, thank you, Connie. All right, so remember to renew your membership and buy some fruit. Support the League. This evening, we are hearing from members of the Political Action Committee for Measure 2141, the Corvallis Livability Services Levy that you will be seeing on your November 7th ballot, or maybe you've already seen it and voted. We are happy to have panelists Tracy Yee, the chair of the Levy PAC and Ward 8 City Councilor, Biff Traber, PAC member and former City of Corvallis mayor, and Gabe Shepard, PAC member and Ward 4 City Councilor. We will first hear from the speakers for about a presentation and some pre-submitted questions, and then open for discussion, both online and in the audience. If you're online, again, remember at any point in time to just plug a question into the Q&A box. It is important to note that the League of Women Voters of Corvallis has endorsed Measure 2141, and thus tonight's program falls within the advocacy portion of the League's work. With that, I want to welcome Tracy Yee, and chair of the PAC and Ward 8 City Councilor, to give an overview of the levy.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Tracy Yee. I am the Ward 8 City Councilor, and I'm the chair of the PAC. And I'm just going to do an overview of the measure. And thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us and giving us this opportunity to talk about the levy. So this is about the City Livability Services Local Option Levy, otherwise known as Measure 2141. This levy is, I'm going to put my glasses on. It renews the existing livability levy at the same rate that it was proposed at $1.07 per $1,000 of assessed property value. So it is flat. It's not an increase. It's the same amount that was approved before. The levy would be in place for 5 years, beginning in July 1 of 2024 when the current one expires, and it goes through June 30th of 2029. If the levy passes, it's estimated to raise 34 million and some change over the next 5 years. The way that the revenue is used, every year, $480,000 is allocated annually to local social service agencies. That is an increase up from $360,000 a year. And then after that, the remaining 51.9% for services goes to the Corvallis Public Library. And 48.1% goes to services at Parks and Recreation. So what does that mean in real life? What is $1.07 per $1,000 of assessed value? Well, first I want to make sure people understand we're not talking about, this is a property tax. So we're not talking about the market value of your home. We're talking about the assessed value. And there is a difference. And I think I got my property bill recently, and you can see the lines on there that talk about the market value and the assessed value. So the assessed home values, they can increase up to 3% every year as per state law. But the levy tax rate remains the same at $1.07 per $1,000 of assessed value. And as an example, for a homeowner with an assessed value of $300,000, it would be $321 a year or $26.75 per month for this levy. So what does the $480,000 annually for social services cover? As I mentioned, if the levy passes, that is actually an increase. So last year's levy provided $360,000 for social services, and these are some examples. This is not the entire amount, but I wanted to just highlight some of the large amounts that went out. So social services that the city allocated to were community outreach, community shelter, the Boys and Girls Club, Jackson Street Youth Shelter, the Food Bank, ABC House, Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center, Stone Soup, Vina Moses, and several others. So we do, the levy does provide social services, important social services in the community. And then what happens if the levy fails? Well, it's kind of simple. There would be no direct funding allocations to social services from city funds. The city does serve as a pass-through for various state and federal funding for social services, but as far as direct city allocations, there would not be any. For Parks and Recreation, this first year, if the levy passes, 48.1% would equal about $2.9 million. And this one's a little tricky, but the levy provides 50% of revenue for Parks and Rec, and the other 50% of revenue is generated by fees for services and programs. So that's, you know, swim lessons and yoga classes and those types of fees. And then the expense budget is paid 50% from revenue, and the other 50% of expenses are covered from the general fund. So the levy funds pay for adult and youth sport programs, day camps, teen and senior focused programs, the creative and cultural performing arts programming at the Majestic and other places. It covers facility operations at the Majestic, the Osborne Aquatic Center, and the Corvallis Community Center, and maintaining over 2,000 acres of city parks, over 47 parks. So that includes trail maintenance, tree planting, sanitation, you know, cleaning the restrooms, all of that. So that is what the levy goes for. It's a little more complicated for Parks and Rec if the levy does not pass, or the levy fails. Really, facilities with a narrow focus, such as the Majestic Theater and the Osborne Aquatic Center, are likely to shutter completely. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't ever use the pool and I don't ever go to the Majestic, it's important to think about the loss of revenue, not only from those operations shuttering, but the visitors, those generate revenue for the city as well, just in terms of tourism. So the Osborne Aquatic Center hosts over 35 competitive swimming programs and things like that. So when those competitors come, the athletes and their families come to town over the year, or they come to the Majestic to see shows, it generates about $1.5 million in Corvallis at restaurants and hotels and businesses. So it's not just about losing the Majestic Theater or the Osborne Aquatic Center. It's also the revenue, that the follow-on revenue in the city that makes our city vibrant. And so it's very important. And then of course, services would be cut. There'd be fewer staff for park maintenance, mowing, cleaning restrooms, all of the things that we enjoy about our parks. So the Corvallis Public Library, again, after the first $480,000 is allocated to social services, 51.9% of the remaining money, or $3.1 million the first year, would go to the Corvallis Public Library. The levy provides 35% of the overall library budget. So this allows the library to be open 7 days a week for a total of 61 hours a week. It provides educational and outreach programs such as the book box, early literacy programs, or the book delivery program. The levy also provides 53% of the materials budget for the library. So that's books, DVDs, bilingual materials. We have one of the largest collections in Oregon. Really anything that you can check out come out of the materials budget. The library also provides computers and internet access for those who don't have internet service at home or access to a computer. So the library still serves a really important function for people. The levy pays for about 60 library staff positions, and that's 20 union positions and 40 casual temporary positions. And the library also serves another purpose, a really important one, which is warming and cooling during inclement weather and during smoke. So the library is open to the public, it's open to everyone, and that's a really important service. So what happens if the levy fails for the library? Well, the open hours would be reduced from 41 hours or 61 hours to 40 hours per week, which means the library would close on Sundays and Mondays. And then the remaining days, Tuesday through Saturday, the hours would be reduced on either end. It opened a little later at 10 and it would close at 5. There's an intergovernmental agreement between Corvallis and Benton County to provide services throughout the county, and that would be in jeopardy. Obviously, staff positions would be cut because the levy funds 60 positions. And then outreach programs would be cut, including book delivery and other educational programs. That's pretty critical. So in conclusion, I would ask you to please vote yes on measure 2141 on November 7th. Ballot should be out. And I've already filled mine out. Yes, and I already voted. So happy to take your questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Great. So we have a couple of questions available that have been pre-submitted, and then also I'll be monitoring the Q&A box. It looks like we have a couple of questions maybe coming in there as well. And some of these questions that were submitted, I think we've already covered a little bit. How long will the levy last? But I'm just going to go through these and just make sure that you had an opportunity to be able to respond. And I'm going to let you decide who might be rotating in answers here.
Doing a mic or would be...
You know, I think a microphone would be best. One moment.
Yeah.
So this does work.
There you go.
All right, so how long will the levy last if it's passed?
This is a 5-year levy.
Great. And what cuts has the city already made, or what is the city doing to help in terms of adjusting budgets, if anything?
Well, I mean, I was going to say, when you ask that in particular, given this is a renewal of an existing levy, part of this is the city does a very tight management of its levy budgets as well as its a permanent rate budget in the general fund. And a lot of what it's doing to be able to support what we're able to do for the city doesn't involve cuts. It involves very careful management of the funds. And the other part to keep in mind is, I would say back, it's going on 12 years when we brought the local option levy forward and have continued here, is we've made a distinction between some of the services that we absolutely must do, like public safety, police and fire, or our land use management, or as I mentioned, financial management of the city. Those are things that must be done no matter what. And we use the permanent rate for that. The levy came into play the first time because we realized we were cutting. And that was the 2011 levy, is the city had already cut things, and we can talk more later, but they were cutting in the things that are very valuable but aren't in the required category. Things that are important to the quality, that what makes Corvallis a great place to live. And that's now, as we've refined this, is represented by the Parks and Rec and the services that Tracy described, as well as the library and those services. And 10 years ago, the Parks and Rec went through this process of creating an overall strategy and implementing it for how to provide substantial amount of funding for their services from fees, and how to set the fees appropriately to be able to meet the need and make sure that generally available services that are important to everybody and used by everybody aren't something that are a financial burden to everybody. So there's this scaling of what the fees are for various recreation programs, various services. So that is all something that was done 10 or 12 years ago. I'm trying to remember exactly when that was first put in place. So it's things that's been ongoing to manage finances as the costs for all of us have been going up, including the city government. Hopefully not too long an answer, but
Well, kind of along those lines on the financial projections into the future, there have been a couple of questions submitted on, we're asked to renew the levy at the 5-year mark, it's another 5 years. Is the plan to renew it every 5 years? Is there a different financial sort of path forward that is a different way than having continued levy? Are we gonna face this every 5 years?
Sure. So, by Oregon's constitution, there's a limited amount of ways that local governments can raise money. And one of them is this local option levy. I can't speak for future councils, and that's one thing we always are reminded, is that we can't predict what the council for 8-12 years in the future is going to do. But it makes sense to me that, like Biff was saying, these are services that are not required, but are very vital to the fabric of what we think of as Corvallis. And it makes sense the voters every 5 years get a chance to weigh in on if they still think that those things are valuable and important. So I do see this as a continuing way of just reaffirming that support that the community has for these services. And like I said, there's very limited ways that cities can raise money in Oregon. Look at Measure 5 and Measure 50 if you want to look into some policy stuff. But.
Well, maybe along those lines with ways that the city can raise money, there was a question on, are there options to add or increase fees at the, Osborne or library or something like that to cover, and I'm not sure if that has been part of the consideration question raised.
well, I was trying to pass it off to the current counselors because I'm not sure all the discussions that have gone in. As I said before, the Parks and Rec went through this process of putting together a process and a strategy that they reapply regularly and review with council. I would point out on the library side, we run into something that's very important. As I learned early on as a counselor and as mayor, that library services are an important part of what goes on in a democracy. And there is a general principle that you tend not to charge for library services because they're in this category as they're used by everybody, no matter their needs. And if you start charging for the services, you start running into restricting access to information if you can't afford it, or restricting access to services, whether they're library programs or just to check out books or what books are available. And so you have these two areas, one of which the fees don't really apply to, and the other one of which has been worked aggressively over the years to work on a reasonable fee structure. And I would echo what Gabe said a few minutes ago. The key thing here, I'm going to keep sounding like the historian, but in the 8 to 10 years ago period, there was council put together a whole council task force to look at what they call sustainable funding, or sustainable budget, I think we called it, but examine all kinds of options available, and none of them were able to replace the local option levy with the current law. So perhaps things like property tax reform, or things that would allow the cities to do more with payroll taxes, for example, which can only be applied to transit districts, not to other services from a city point of view. So those are things that perhaps at the state legislature need to be dealt with rather than local.
I just want to say something else about, so, Viv addressed the library fees. I mean, it's just the philosophy and the establishment of public libraries that they remain free and accessible. And for parks and recreation, there is a cost recovery structure, where the fees that we charge should cover the cost of the service. But it's also really important to understand that, you know, our public parks are open to everyone, and accessibility and equality is very important. So if we were to charge fees that covered 100% of our expenses, they would become exorbitant and unreachable for a lot of the population. And we want the parks to be accessible to everybody. Everyone uses the parks.
Yeah, I'll cap that off with saying that libraries and parks are one of the few places left in our society where you can go and exist without having to pay. And part of the reason we don't raise fees is we like keeping it that way.
Yes.
So.
Thank you. Let's see if there are any questions. Connie,
We were talking about the intergovernmental agreements between Corvallis and Benton County. So if the library were to have these cuts, could it be even greater because of obligations to that intergovernmental agreement? Meaning that Corvallis is obligated to contribute goods and services to the organization, you know, like the other libraries that would affect the amount that could be spent in Corvallis, I guess is my.
and I'm just going to repeat the question for people online. So I think the nugget of that is related to the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the county. Does that affect the sort of the cost structure or the fees in the future? Is that,
Could it make it worse?
could it make
So
it worse?
We've got a certain amount of cuts we're looking at, but underneath that, there's this intergovernmental agreement that maybe the library is bound to. So the cuts might have to be greater in order to meet those obligations.
So the answer, the short answer is yes. And you know, if the levy fails, it would have compounding effects across the county. I believe that all library employees in the Benton County area are technically City of Corvallis employees as a part of the IGA. So when we're talking about staff cuts, that affects all of those libraries as a part of the intergovernmental agreement. The amount of books and new resources that are purchased, that the resources, we're in a shared pool here in Benton County. So the amount of new resources that all of those other libraries would reduce too. And you know, it's not just Corvallis paying for all of these services out in the county. This is a governmental agreement with the county. But yes, if this fails, it would have compounding effects across the county.
Great, thank you. Realized the online, it was mainly just some comments about the sound quality is good and things like that. So, I'm gonna see if there were any final questions from anybody in the audience, and I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A box online as well. And as we wrap up, this is going to be a short and sweet presentation. I would like to provide the opportunity for each of you to maybe just take a minute and talk about why are you on the PAC, why are you supporting this levy, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I would start that I think it's quite simple that I use the library, not as much as many other people do. I use the parks, not so many recreation programs, but the ability to be in the parks, to have events in the parks, to go walking in the parks, to use various trails the city has, are all important to me. And then I take a step back and look at it and say, yes, this is part of what makes Corvallis special. This is what I appreciate about this community. And having been through it, I understand a lot of the details, but to me, it's a fairly simple decision. We can either be a city whose government provides some of the basic required services and that's it, or we can be a city that has the quality of life that we have in the city. And that's why I recommend I think it's an easy decision. that we need to go do that. You've done that in the past. This is not increasing your cost. And so let's go ahead and please do that. Please remember to vote. This is the only thing on the ballot, so you may think about skipping. Please vote and vote yes for the city livability services levy.
I don't know if I can top that, but I can definitely agree with that. I think the services provided by this levy are what makes Corvallis special. It is the creative arts at the Majestic and all the programming that happens at the Corvallis Community Center. I mean, there's so many services and classes and things for wellness and health and trails and the library itself. I mean, these are all things that just make the quality of life here so amazing. And as I said, I already filled out my ballot and voted for it, so I'm really hoping you do too. Thanks.
Yeah, my ballot is in my car. I was gonna take it in as a prop, but I left it in the car. But I just wanted to say that I wanted to address a couple things. One is there might be a feeling out there that you want more funding for the library and the parks. There are plenty of foundations you can donate to make that happen. But that is absolutely not a reason to vote no on this, because if a no vote would, gut the services that matter so much. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that like, if you don't think this is enough, there are other ways to get involved, but please still vote yes. So like this said, like I use these services, I go to these parks, this is where I spend a lot of my time. And it is what makes Corvallis a special place. The last levy passed with about 70% of the vote, just showing you that this is something that this community supports so much and values our libraries and our parks, and this money that goes to social services. A lot of people talk about that too, and how they ask us how much money and how the city supports social services. This is one of the main ways. As a counselor, I also feel like it's kind of my duty to get out there. Like, why am I involved with PAC? It's my duty to get out there and get involved and like actually make this happen, support our staff. Like Tracy was saying, there's 60 staff positions, and just in the library that would be affected by this. And as a counselor, I need to get out there and show that I'm doing the job of doing the job I was elected to do, and try and keep those jobs and keep these services alive. So yeah, please, November 7th, like they said, if it is the only thing on the ballot, so it makes it super easy. You don't have to spend time thinking about all these races and who you're going to choose in what race. Just one question, open it, dot it, call it good. Thanks.
Thank you so much, speakers. Thanks for joining us this evening. And we have a final question from Connie.
It's more of an editorial comment. I raised 2 kids in Corvallis, and I don't know what we would have done without the swimming pool, the parks, and the library. And I would venture to say that not a day went by during their childhood that we weren't in at least one of those venues. And anyone who has children who votes against this needs to really think about what that will be like for their kids if they don't have pool, parks, the library, and now the Majestic Theater as well. These are really, really important for the children in Corvallis. They're accessible. I mean, the pool's not free, but the parks and the library are accessible for everyone. Imagine if we had no story time. I mean, it's just unimaginable that we wouldn't have these services. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Connie, for that editorial comment. And I'll also just point out to those that were online, that was a vote of support from a person in the audience talking about her own experience with her 2 kids growing up in Corvallis and what she would have done if she didn't have the parks and the library and Osborne and the pool. And this is a big factor. Today, we're talking from the library, right? We're at a community meeting at the library. This weekend coming up, I'll be at the Majestic 2 nights in a row for the sing-along of the Rocky Horror Picture Show and for the showing of the Addams Family. So, we're in the middle of classes at Osborne with my 6-year-old. These are the daily in and out of family lives, and I speak passionately, both as a individual, but also today with the hat of the League of Women Voters, because we have endorsed this measure. And we urge you, first of all, to just make sure, if you're out there, you're watching the recording later, whatever the fact may be, please just vote. We need a high turnout in any election. And we also invite you to vote yes on measure 2141. And with that, thank you so much, speakers, and to you out there in the Zoom room. Have a good night. Thank you.
Doris League,